Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm doing something different, something I've actually been really excited to do, which is just talking about the Lord of the Rings books. I have been, a, it's hard to say, okay? I'd say I'm a decently large fan of the Lord of the Rings movies. I've seen all of them all the way through, only twice though, so it is kind of hard to call myself a super fan or whatever, but I really enjoyed them. And so then I've gone and I've read the books because I really enjoy reading. And for the past year or so, I believe I've been reading them. It's been kind of not quite on and off, I would say, but I usually read multiple books at a time. So I was reading Lord of the Rings, and I've also just been reading Discworld. I've been loving that series, but every time I finish the Lord of the Rings books, I'd usually slow down, focus on reading other things, and then I'd start up for the next one and kind of get back into it. So I took quite a long time to get through them. I should also say I also read The Hobbit. I keep saying Lord of the Rings. I should say, the Middle Earth books, I guess, or J.R.R. Tolkien's books or whatever. I don't know. But actually, first, I want to just say, look at this set I have. I love this set. The letters might be reversed. I don't know. I might need to fix that. But this is just, these are just so nice because when trying to pick between, getting hardcover books or soft cover, it's a really difficult choice because I think in general, when it's paperback, they feel just much better in your hands. It feels more natural. Hardcovers, they don't feel as good, but they're a lot more durable. Because obviously the hardcover, you're less likely to get those bent pages and everything. But then there's also the problem where they have covers on them, and those usually get ripped up a bit, and that's kind of annoying. And so it's hard to decide. But these are like leather, and so they're nice and durable, but they're also flexible. So it feels good when you're opening it up and reading them. And so, man, I don't know. There's something about these where I love this set. These are just some of my, in terms of just like purely the covers and the books and everything. These are like some of my favorites I've ever had. So they're pretty cool. The designs are just like really basic and really simple, but they work quite well. So I guess the one thing about this set is that they are kind of small. Like, I don't know, you can kind of tell they're not that big, and so the writing in these is like it's pretty tiny. I got used to it eventually, but it is, I don't know, it is slightly something that might bug you. But I don't even know what this set is called, but I would like 100% recommend it. But anyways, to talk about the actual stuff that matters, that was actually getting talked about, Lord of the Rings. I guess I will start with The Hobbit. This one is a bit of a different case because I did read this first. Because I started reading it before I even, read Lord of the Rings, obviously. And then I've gone and watched the movies, which I knew were, they have a reputation, that's for sure. But just going through and reading this book, it was quite an interesting experience just because it's so much like simpler and smaller scale than The Lord of the Rings. Now, I hadn't read the books at this point, but I had seen the movies when I read this, and obviously the world just I don't want to say the world felt small because it really didn't, but it was clear that we were getting a very narrow view, just focusing in on this small story. And it really works in that way, actually, because it kind of just feels like a small little tale in a huge wide world, which I think kind of fits with the narrative as a whole, as it's about Bilbo Baggins just being from a small town and just going out on an adventure and kind of seeing that the world is much bigger than it might seem. And it's a fun book. The best way I describe it is very fairy tale esque or folklore esque or something like that, because it is extremely simple, I would say. And sometimes that is a detractor from it, just because I don't feel like I'm getting quite as much depth from some of the characters, specifically the dwarves. I mean, famously, there's like, was it 13, 14 dwarves? And so they don't get a lot of characterization. But it works better in this book than in the movies, for sure. I don't even know what to say about the movies because they're just long and not a whole lot of fun. like there's every movie has like a couple moments that I'm like, oh wow, that's actually pretty good. Like Bilbo interacting with Gollum, I think is a good scene in the movies and stuff like that. I actually okay. I think the biggest um positive I could say about the movies is I do really like Bilbo's characterization and just his character in general, I guess. I felt like I got to know him pretty good, and he was decently interesting. It wasn't enough for 3 hour long movies, but he was a pretty decent character in the movies. Um, but everything else in those movies really just feels either or I mean at times it's like downright bad. It's not like I don't even know how to say it because it's not like horrendous. All right, like but it's mostly just because you can tell there's a whole lot of budget behind it, and that's what's kind of keeping it together, which is never a good sign. Because there's not a whole lot of like creativity or any interesting storytelling going on. Just a whole lot of they feel very empty. Especially as I said, this is a pretty simple story. It's short, it's breezy, it's a nice, easy read, and so for them to just really try to turn it into this grand epic and try to make it seem so larger than life and all that, it does not work. It goes completely against the overall feeling of this book. I know originally they wanted to do just two movies, which even then I think is kind of pushing it. Because I think when adapting something to movies, I think you naturally kind of should cut stuff out. I think it just works better for the narrative pacing of movies. It's not going to be the same as the narrative pacing of a book or a novel. And so I'm like, even like two movies, that would be quite a bit, but it would definitely be better than what we currently got. Because what we have now is just, I mean, it's just nothing for several hours. Um, and they add so much stuff that is uh like I really did not enjoy like the Gandalf side story, which it felt like that was supposed to be kind of fan servicey, being like, oh look, it's like Sauron's here and he's doing stuff and he's part of this story, isn't that cool? And I'm just like, no, it's really not. Like I don't really care. It doesn't fit in, and it doesn't fit with the flow of the story, and it just feels off. And there's a lot of things I could say. I I don't want this whole video to just be me complaining about these movies, because there's so many points that have already been said. I mean the romance thing is bad. There's a lot more stuff that they do in Lake Town, which I guess is kind of cool, but a lot of it feels like a waste of time. There's really just silly scenes. I shouldn't even call them silly, because there are movies where it's like, okay, this is bad, but I'm kind of having a good time. But in these movies, it's just like, oh. I mean, there's the moment where they show up to the mountain and they try to find the keyhole. Oh, we can't find it. Well, guess we're heading home, guys. Like, we're just going to pack it up. And it's just like, what are we, like, this makes no sense. There's the dragon sickness thing with Thorin, and like, I don't know. I'm just rambling at this point because, like, what do you want from me? You guys know these movies. I'm sure I'm not even sure. I know that there are people who really like them, and those people fascinate me because I don't get it. Like most movies, I'm like, I can at least understand someone's argument, but I have a really hard time hearing out people's arguments for this movie. But I mean, I guess if you love the Hobbit movies, like, I don't know, try to explain it to me, because I haven't had it explained real well to me yet. Yeah, I spent a while just talking about this. The book is really solid, though. I think Lord of the Rings trilogy does a much better job than this, but I don't think that means this is like bad or not worth reading or anything. As I said, it's a pretty easy read. Just hop in, kind of chill, and just go through it, because it's pretty fun. There is kind of like the fact that the way it's written is like not. I don't know, the language they use is definitely like old timey, I guess is the best way to put it. And so that takes some getting used to, but I don't think it makes it too difficult to read. And that fact goes for all the books. But let's move on to the Fellowship of the Ring. So with some of these ones, I've read them a while ago, so I don't remember all the details. But there are some really interesting things I found when compared to the movies. So one of the most famous, I think, is Tom Bombadil, because people absolutely love him, and he wasn't in the movies, and so people were mad about that. I am like totally okay with the fact that he wasn't in the movies. That's probably really controversial to say, but I mean, he was in the book, and his scene was all right. I don't know, like there was like a chapter where they were. I mean, yeah, he just gets a chapter, and it's not like incredibly interesting. Like it's not bad though. It's all right. Um, I don't know. Tom Bombadil is just kind of okay. I mean, I get it. He works with the themes, sort of the underlying themes in Lord of the Rings. One of them being like the environment, and I don't know what else to say about it. Just very pro nature and saving the environment and that type of stuff. So he works with the themes and all that, and that's cool, I guess. But he's also not that important. So I think it's totally fine that he wasn't in the movies. There's some parts that I found that I was surprised that I found really enjoyable in the book compared to the movies. Parts that they really expanded on. I think one of them being like the prancing pony. Like that's just kind of a quick scene. We're just going through the story. Like that's not a part that's especially interesting in the movies, except for the fact that they do meet Aragorn there, and that's kind of cool. But it's not like, I wouldn't say it's a huge standout moment for most people, but for whatever reason, I just really enjoyed that in this book. Maybe it's just I love fantasy, and just the tavern with all the people kind of sharing information and rumors and all that. It felt very traditional fantasy. Obviously, this is Lord of the Rings. This created the traditional fantasy genre, but I don't know. That was just something that I really enjoyed, and I was quite surprised by that fact. Other than that, I don't know. A lot of it was quite similar to the movies I found. It wasn't anything too, different. I mean, there's obviously certain things in the narrative that are different. Like I know, Gandalf in the movies, he did not want to go to the Mines of Moria, and in the book he was totally down for it. And so that's just kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, that's really different. But the overall narrative is pretty similar. I'm trying to think, it has been a little bit since I read these. I'm trying to think of what parts were maybe expanded on that were, that had to be trimmed down in the movies. But I think overall, and this is just, more compliments to the movies, they fit pretty much all the stuff that they really needed to. And I mean, that's one of the best things about this, that trilogy of movies, is just how much they're able to get everything that really makes Lord of the Rings what it is into those three movies, and it works great. Yeah, there's obviously the whole thing with the songs and the poems. This is throughout all the books, and that is something that's really interesting to me, because I wish they were in the movies, but I also don't know how well they would be able to make them fit in. They tried kind of with the Hobbit, and actually, okay, the songs in the Hobbit, they were all right. I think they did a pretty okay job trying to put those in, but it also felt like they gave up like halfway through. I don't know. We don't need to talk about the Hobbit anymore. Yeah, this was a pretty good fun read. This one was probably the one where I was like, this is very, very similar to the movie, and I didn't feel any too huge differences. It was very enjoyable though. And then next up though, we have the Two Towers. Pretty interesting sort of, how do I put it? The way the narrative is structured. So the Lord of the Rings, I'm sure everyone knows this, but originally one big book is split into 6 parts though. So then split into 3 books. So now each book has 2 parts. And so in this, after the breaking of the Fellowship in the first one, the first half of this is completely just focused on Legolas, Gimli, and Merry and Pippin's story, and Aragorn, and those guys. And then the second half is focused on Sam and Frodo, which is, it feels very weird because you just spend so much more time just focusing on one group that if like it feels weird because it's like there's all these other characters. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're up to. And I guess it could make sense because it's like, okay, you get the complete story of this, and then you get the complete story of these guys. And so I understand that, but I really like that the movie just really interweave the stories, sort of cut back and forth. There was times, because on the rewatch, the second watch, where I did notice, like, there is a lot of cutting back and forth, and sometimes it's a bit much, but I don't think it's that huge of a deal. In the novel, though, I found that the first half with, Legolas, Gimli, Aragorn, all them, I found that to be much less interesting than Sam and Frodo. So like the first half, like I was kind of trudging through it. I was like, okay, this is all right. I get the story and all that. But then, Sam and Frodo, I really enjoyed their story. I think their interactions with Gollum and all that is some of the best stuff in these books and even in the movies. And so that was really good. But it does make me quite split on this book because literally like one half I don't like as much and the other half I really like. Another part that I found interesting in this book, we get much more expansion on Treebeard and the Ents as a whole, and that section of the film I found, that's probably one of my lower points for the movie. It's not terrible, but Merry and Pippin interacting with Treebeard, it's just not as interesting. But expanded and everything that they do in this book and how you get a lot more stuff with that, you get more Ents and as actual characters and you see them a lot more. It was actually really good and I really, really enjoyed it. So that was a really surprising part because like in the movies, I didn't care for it, but in the book it is really cool and really interesting actually. Another part though is Helm's Deep, which is like huge moment in the movie, incredibly famous, like, largely regarded as like one of the best action sequences, and I would have to agree, it's incredible. In the book it feels like I don't think it actually is, but it kind of feels just kind of skimmed over. Like it doesn't feel as significant or as huge as in the movies. Obviously it is still like a big moment, but I think just when you compare it to what they did in the film, it isn't as impactful, I would say. Which, not a huge fault of the book, but just they do it great in the movie. So it is hard. It's hard to live up to that, I guess. All right. And then finally we have The Return of the King, which is actually the shortest one, which I find funny because you look at this and it's like, whoa, that's like, it's much bigger than the other ones, but there's just a lot of appendix, which I've not read all the appendixes and the whatever, all the extra information. I split it right there. That much of it is just the appendixes and all that. So quite a lot of it. But the actual story of Return of the King. So third movie is the longest one. I believe they kind of took some stuff from the Two Towers and then kind of shifted it over to Return of the King. Make it a bit more substantial, I guess, was what they were doing. But they did also cut stuff, specifically at the very end. It's kind of weird, but I guess I'm starting at the end of this book, with the hobbits all returning to the Shire. And in the book, it's like overrun, and they have this whole story where they gotta, take it back. And it's kind of a good moment to show their growth and their independence because, I mean, throughout the story, they do incredible things, but they do also rely largely on all these other characters that they have supporting them. Like, they have Gandalf with them. They have Legolas, Gimli, Aragorn, all them. And so it's kind of a cool moment of showing like, hey, we've grown. We don't need these guys. We can be strong without them. And so that's all cool. And it wasn't in the movies, which is something I guess I'm okay with, especially because the epilogue, the ending of Return of the King in the movie is quite long. I think it's quite famously has like a dozen endings where it feels like the movie should end, but then it just kind of keeps going, and so I get it. It makes a lot of sense when you want to keep the pacing of the movie. But yeah, this was really quite enjoyable. Um, Not a whole lot of like huge differences between the book. There is obviously, I think, crap, I'm forgetting. Just like the Army of the Dead, whatever they're called. Uh, you don't. I don't think you see as much of this in this book, like in the extended edition specifically of Return of the King. Like you get a lot more of that stuff. Isn't as huge of a focus in this, and in general, like the action sequences are not going to be really fully described and laid out in the book. Like they are really just kind of like we just kind of move on. That's not really like Tolkien. He doesn't focus a whole lot on actual like actions of what people are doing. He doesn't do a lot of describing of that. He just kind of goes through it, and that's that. Which is something that I could think I can understand why people might not like his writing as much. I'm kind of okay with it. It's not something that's a real huge deal to me. He focuses a lot on like interactions and characters talking to each other and that kind of stuff. Um, so I guess something that does kind of end up being a fault of this book is that the action sequences don't feel as significant, but I think they still feel big. Like especially the big moments, I think it still works quite well. Um, yeah, it's a good read. So all in all, it took me 9 months to read these books. That is obviously considering the fact that I was not like completely dedicated to just reading these. I was reading other things and kind of taking breaks in between. And so honestly, by the time I finally finished, I was kind of like, thank goodness. Like I'm kind of done with this. I've been reading these for quite a long time, but it was still a really good and enjoyable read. Now, I will say, I don't know how much I would have enjoyed the Lord of the Rings books if I had not seen the movies first. Just going through these, there's a lot of like these are pretty dense. They pack a lot of characters' names and informations and lore and stuff, into pretty tight, tightly knit books. And so because of that, if I had not seen the movies, I don't know how well I'd be able to keep track of stuff because they just kind of throw out a lot of names, and like I still got confused at times because I was like, wait, how are they connected to them? Is that I don't know. There's a lot of names thrown out, and sometimes it doesn't matter a whole lot to the story, and it's just kind of flavor text, I guess. So I don't know. I feel weird because I definitely enjoyed reading these, but I don't know how much I would have enjoyed them if I hadn't seen the movies, and I still think overall I do enjoy the movies more. I know, huge, controversial opinion or whatever, because people are always supposed to enjoy the books more, but I mean the movies they do so much great stuff. Um, Overall, if you have seen the movies and you really enjoyed them, go ahead and read these. I'm sure you'll have a good time. If you enjoy reading, they're just good books. It's it's also just they're good reads just to see like the birth of what the fantasy genre is. Um, there's a lot of just interesting things about that. Tolkien, he is great at world building. That is definitely like his number one thing. As I said, like actions and stuff, even if it's not an actual like action sequence, just what characters are doing doesn't get a whole lot of focus. It is really just skimmed over. Um, and so he is much better with the whole world building and stuff like that. Characters talking to each other. That's where a lot of world building happens because they will talk for a long time just about different stories or legends and stuff like that. Um, I can like completely understand why people would not enjoy these books though. Like it makes a lot of sense. They are not because there are times. I mean, I'll admit there were times where I wasn't super interested and engaged. Like I said, the first half of the Two Towers did not, capture me a whole lot. So I can see why people wouldn't enjoy these as much. But I think they're great books. I mean, obviously they're so incredibly famous, but I had a real good time reading these. I want to do more videos just talking about books I'm reading. I really enjoy reading. I do whole lot of it. So if you want to see more of that, I guess smash like and subscribe or whatever. You can leave a comment, tell me about your thoughts on the books or the movies of the Lord of the Rings universe as a whole. Um, oh, I forgot. I also watched the animated films. I don't have a whole lot to say about them, but the animated films are good. Especially the animated Hobbit film is really fun to see because it's 1 hour long, as compared to the 9 hours they took to cover the book in the live action. And it's fun. Those are fun movies. If you really enjoyed Lord of the Rings, go ahead and give those a watch because I think they're a pretty good time. They're nothing incredible, but they're pretty fun. Yeah, leave a comment. You can tell me your thoughts. These are good books. See you guys next time. Bye.